Imagine going to high school in 2013, in the era of selfies, Netflix, iPhones, and still being told your prom is whites only. Sounds impossible, right? But it happened. And the wild part? That town isn't an outlier. Because right now, in the 2020s, there's a school district under investigation for admitting 0 Black students into its gifted and talented program. None. 0 Black students. Or what about the town that didn't recognize Black History Month until 2023? I'm looking at things that are happening today in towns that look perfect on postcards, safe, scenic, and secretly segregated. From gated New England suburbs to Midwest communities that still warn outsiders who don't belong, racism didn't vanish, it just got better at hiding. America's most racist cities might not be where you think. On paper, Mequon, Wisconsin looks like the American dream. Top schools, green lawns, quiet streets, but history and modern day data tell a very different story. Mequon was once labeled a sundown town, a place where Black people were outright forbidden for being present after dark. And these weren't mere rumors. Local oral history from early Black residents describe being stared at downtown, being cautioned to leave before dusk, or being asked, "Hey, what are you doing here?" One of the most striking episodes involves baseball legend Hank Aaron, who in the late 1950s couldn't even buy a home directly from the builder in Mequon. A white friend had to act as a middleman. Yet, the past does not stay gone. Today, Mequon's institutions still lack representation. In the police department, for example, there is reportedly only 1 African American and 1 Asian officer among about 40 officers. And for those who arrive from more diverse places, the contrast is stark. Walter Jack Lanier, who moved from Detroit, described the shock of living in a place that was, in his words, almost completely white with very few Black families. Think about that, living in the 2020s in a place hailed for its suburban excellence, feeling culturally foreign in neighborhoods with identical houses and almost no diversity. Meanwhile, families like Frida Parker Jefferson's, who were early pioneers of integration in Mequon, only see that their struggle is mostly erased from local memory. That tension between Mequon's image as a model suburb and the lived reality of exclusion is exactly what makes it a nice town with an asterisk. Small towns can hide a lot behind their quiet streets, and Lexington, Mississippi is a powerful example of that. Lexington is a small town of about 1,200 people, with approximately 76% of its residents being Black. Mississippi's reputation precedes it, so it's no surprise that it made the list. The local police department has been under federal investigation for civil rights violations. The Justice Department's 2024 report found that the Lexington Police Department engaged in a pattern or practice of unconstitutional conduct, including unlawful stops, searches, arrests, excessive force, retaliation, and punishing people for the inability to pay fines. Particularly harrowing was when one person was tased 18 times and left unable to speak. Another kicked so hard he wet himself. Officers used profanity and then even arrested people for using profanity, which is First Amendment protected. Wait, what? Statistics show Black people in Lexington are 17.6 times more likely to be arrested than whites. Harrison, Arkansas looks like so many small towns. Tree-lined streets, a courthouse square, folks waving at you from porches, but for decades, it's also carried a reputation that draws headlines. One of America's most racist towns. And some of that reputation isn't just old history, it still echoes today. Historically, Harrison expelled or violently forced out nearly its entire Black population in the early 1900s through riots, threats, burning homes, and mob actions. It was once a sundown town forbidding Black people after dark. Fast forward to 2020, A man holds a simple Black Lives Matter sign, and he's met with jeers, slurs, people yelling, "Get your booty out of town," but more expletives, and even asked to leave a Walmart. His video goes viral, and suddenly the world is watching. The tension isn't subtle. Despite that, change is stirring. In 2023, business and civic leaders organized events like We Are One, powered by Moncrief Game Changer and local churches, bringing students into Little Rock to engage in inclusion workshops. Harrison's Chamber of Commerce formally recognized Black History Month, finally, in 2023. The city maintains a race relations page and task force that openly admits Harrison has a troubled past and long-lasting perception of bigotry, and says many locals are tired of that narrative and want to be judged differently. And yet, even with these gestures, the numbers remind you what's still left to do. Harrison is about 95% white and less than 0.5% Black. Representation in schools, in leadership, and public life still lags far behind. Many residents of color say that even in everyday life, there remains a strong sense of being an outsider. But know that Harrison isn't unique. It's a microcosm. It shows how places can look peaceful, even inviting, while hiding division. Later in this video, we'll visit towns where the facade is even stronger, where the racism is so hidden, most outsiders don't even see it. Stay tuned to see how deep the roots go. Now, you might not have heard of Greensburg, Indiana, but it's one of those places whose past whispers loud in its present. In 1907, a race riot forced Black residents out of town, setting Greensburg down a path as, you guessed it, another sundown town. Decades later, the explicit signs and rules have mostly fallen away, but what remains is less obvious and arguably more insidious. Neighborhoods remain deeply segregated, housing prices keep many people of color out, and local politics, especially school boards and zoning discussions, often echo old fears. Fixing a legacy like this isn't easy. It demands more than apologies. It means rethinking who gets to live where, who's represented at town meetings, and actually enforcing inclusive policy. In many such towns, the hardest part is admitting the problem. And Greensburg's struggle shows just how far that admission still is. We're now going into the deep South and discussing a county rather than a town. In Georgia, Montgomery County isn't famous for national headlines the way big cities are, but it's where something deeply personal collided with race and public view: the segregated prom. For years, high schools here, yes, plural, as in multiple schools, held separate white proms and Black proms. Private events organized outside of school channels, but deeply woven into community traditions. The images are jarring. Teens dressed up, friends separated by color, all under the same event name, but miles apart. I mean, teenagers being told that even their dancing must align with old racial divides. An HBO documentary called Southern Rights discusses this further. Today, formal policies might have changed in some schools thanks to activism, media pressure, and parents refusing to accept segregation as tradition. But the residue of separation, of discomfort, of exclusion remains. For many Black students, attending a historically white prom still carries anxiety. Parents still weigh whether speaking up is worth the risk. Montgomery County's story reminds us that legal change doesn't always equal emotional or social change. I would like to move on from Georgia, but we're staying in this southern state. On to Wilcox County, Georgia, more specifically Rochelle, Georgia. This one's almost uncanny because it persisted so long. Up until as recently as 2013, Wilcox County High School didn't officially hold proms at all. Instead, white students held their own, Black students had a separate one. The events were private, but tightly enforced by social norms. Attendance meant choosing sides. Crossing that line could mean being blocked, shamed, even having the police called. That year, in 2013, 4 students, 2 white and 2 Black, said enough. They organized the first integrated prom in Wilcox County history, raising money, mobilizing support, and confronting tradition. The prom was one victory, but unfortunately not the end. Some parents still preferred segregation, so many events remain privately organized, and the school's official stance toward inclusivity is patchy. But Rochelle's young activists show how hope can come from youth, but also how difficult it is to undo layers of culture. It's a story worth sitting with. Sometimes the hardest fences to tear down are the ones people say are just tradition. You may know Baltimore, Maryland for its TV dramas, baseball, and maybe even the news. Recently, Baltimore topped the news for the fact that its school districts had a 0% literacy rate. Zero. No one could read. What? Imagine your chance that health, education, even life itself depends on what number your zip code starts with. In Baltimore today, living in predominantly Black neighborhoods means facing homicide rates that are many times higher than in mostly white areas just miles away. You're more likely to breathe bad air, drink water laced with lead, go to under-resourced schools, or have no grocery store within a safe walk. Structural racism isn't a theory here. It's a daily predicate for what options people get and don't get. In recent years, Baltimore has experimented with some violence interruption programs like Safe Streets, investments in anchor institutions, and community-led revitalizations. But success is mixed. Gentrification pushes housing prices up, mistrust in policing lingers, and infrastructure funding and political clout often still tilt toward the neighborhoods already doing better. Baltimore shows us how disparities anchored in race endure even when everyone claims progress is the goal. Jackson, Mississippi may be running on empty. This city, majority Black, is often among the highest per capita murder cities in the U.S. It suffers from disinvestment, infrastructure decay like pipes, water, and housing, education crisis, political tension over state versus local control, and limited economic opportunities. Violence is a daily reality for many. In Jackson, being majority Black hasn't guaranteed basic life necessities. In fact, for years, it meant frequent boil water orders, aging pipes, and being unable to trust your own tap. In 2022, critical infrastructure failed, leaving over 150,000 people without safe drinking water for weeks. Boil water advisories, failing pumps, and decades of decay became daily reality. Even worse, the city ran out of bottled water to give its residents. It was a hard time living in Jackson in this decade. But there are signs of change. In 2023, the city secured nearly $800 million in federal money to rebuild Jackson's water and sewer systems, one of the biggest single infrastructure infusions in its history. Still, residents say something missing was always more than just the pipes. It's trust. Town halls confront residents who still fear high water bills, inequitable service, and having to choose between paying bills or buying safe water. And now, after years under state or federal oversight, officials are debating whether to bring control back to local hands. It's a battle over water and infrastructure, but also over power, equity, and who gets a say in rebuilding what is broken. Take a drive in St. Louis, Missouri, and you'll see invisible fences, highways, zoning lines, and uneven school district borders that sort folks largely by race and income. Some sidewalks, services, and opportunities feel worlds away depending on which side you live. In many majority Black neighborhoods, life expectancy, school quality, transit access, and grocery store availability are dramatically worse than in adjacent, wider districts. And those disparities didn't appear overnight. They're a result of redlining, neglect, underinvestment, and the long shadow of past policies that still define opportunity. The city is trying to push back with neighborhood trusts, expansion of community policing, violence intervention programs, and nonprofit partnerships. But when the bones of inequality lie in land use, school zone boundaries, and tax bases, small gestures can feel like band-aids. St. Louis is wrestling with the question, how do you untangle structural racism when the structure itself refuses to change? Darien, Connecticut looks like perfection. Coastal New England, manicured lawns, old money houses, high incomes, but beneath the picturesque calm, there's startling evidence that the privileges are engineered, not accidental. Historically, Darien was a sundown town. Fast forward to 2023, and the DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, confirmed some serious disparities. No Black students in Darien's gifted and talented program, while Black students are sharply overrepresented in special education. What's being done? DEI committees are calling out the disparities, school boards are updating policies, and there's some community conversation. The school responds with investigations when slurs appear and partner with groups like the Anti-Defamation League. But the structural issues like zoning, wealth inequality, and historical discrimination have been slow to change. Still, the deeper issues that zoning favors large lots, that high property values act as de facto race filters, that wealth and belonging remain tightly interwoven. And this just doesn't get fixed overnight. Darien reveals the subtle power of exclusion, dressed in the language of excellence and fitting in rather than keeping out. Some towns bury their past, others quietly live it every day. From Arkansas to Connecticut, what we call progress can still depend on your skin color or your zip code. These stories aren't ancient history, they're happening right now in school board meetings, police departments, and neighborhood zoning maps across America. But what if I told you some towns don't just have a racist past, they still legally and socially enforce it today? I'm talking about places in the North, towns that literally warn Black people not to be there after dark. And yes, many of them still exist. Click here to watch racist sundown towns that still exist in the North.